Guys, we have another guest. Get excited with us. We have our resident mold expert, Andrew Melrose, who you may or may not know him as Mold Authority Live on Instagram. He's a mold remediation expert. He helps people navigate mold in their home while maintaining peace of mind, right? Everyone needs that. And he's done hundreds of in-person inspections and testing, writes up remediation protocols and remediation oversight for like lots and lots of clients. So welcome, Andrew, to the Hot Heel Girl podcast. I promise you don't have to be a girl. We have a wide audience.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hello. Good to be on here. Thank you so much for the invite.
So let's just hop in with your journey with mold. I know so many of us, that's how you would get into the space, right? How did it come
Yeah.
to you?
Yeah. So I've always been into health. It's the body fascinates me, the how it works, even mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, just how it all works together. Well, a big part I was missing was the environmental aspect of it, and how, yes, our environment is a huge part of how, our body um, can regulate itself and everything. So I knew nothing really of the environmental side after doing all this research on the other facets of health. Well, then I met Tom Ray, who's awesome, and he's been in the industry about 20 years, and started picking his brain on some things, shadowing him on some inspections. And within a week, I realized this is much more than just a blue collar job where you go in and inspect some homes. Like it's not just the home inspector, and we can talk about that briefly at some point. But it's kind of more. It felt more like a health assessment of a home, which I believe the home is like an extension of the body in a sense. And there's a lot of parallels there. For people who work on the body like yourselves, it's important to test and heal the body. And it's also important to test and heal the home. So that's where this is a very synchronistic relationship, because many people in my space don't know how to test and heal the body the way you guys would, and vice versa. There are hundreds and hundreds of awesome health practitioners who go, wait, how do I get the environment right? And so again, this bridge is extremely important. And I realized that early on. My journey specifically with mold was just probably had it in my house growing up. My parents were like, why is his immune system like so rocked as a kid? And I think there were a lot of facets to it. I obviously was not probably eating the best. I was like kind of stressed kid in a lot of ways, and my body was probably not in the best and strongest of states there. But they actually did have a hunch from a naturopath that maybe mold was part of it. They brought in like a mold inspector, they told me, and even a dog or whatever, and there was nothing really done about it. But I can almost guarantee you, I was exposed growing up in different ways. Well, when I learned about this, I realized that oh, that's why I felt so bad at this person's house, because I could just, all the memories start coming back of of that. And also going into these homes doing inspections, I'm like, man, some of these, like, I leave the inspection, feel like I got hit by a truck, to go home and jump in the sauna and do all the stuff I know how to do to like re-regulate. I'm very thankful that none of those exposures really were like long term. They were just a quick spike in symptoms, and I could kind of re-regulate and go back. But I'm not one of the people who kind of shoo away like, oh no, that's all in your head. Like I definitely know certain environments will kind of hit me in the face the same way it does with other people. So very empathetic towards everyone who has gone through this. And that kind of, in the first few months of doing this work, I was like, man, do I have too much empathy to be doing this job? Because it impacts health, finances, flips people's life upside down, depending on how bad the situation is, right? If it's a widespread problem, or there's just a lot of facets to it. So long-winded answer, but I started doing a ton of inspections and testing, and that's really what I was, is more of the third-party diagnostic person to do the testing and inspection. And then from that third-party independent source, then you write up a protocol and hand it to what I would call the home surgeons, who are the remediators, to then do the job and actually execute what you wrote up. That way there's no conflict of interest. They're two separate companies, and that's a very important thing for clients to know, is you probably don't want your remediator being the one inspecting, because of course he's going to find a problem, right? And then, hey, we'll also fix it for you for this high amount, and we'll also come and test at the end of our remediation and we'll clear our own work. So it's very, very much a conflict of interest there. And so I did more of just the inspection and testing part and realized the huge demand for that. But then also when I got on Instagram a couple years after just doing the in-person stuff, I realized how much national help and guidance and information and consultation that was needed as well. So that's a lot of, what I'm doing now all around the country.
That's so needed, honestly. Pretty much. So we did Q&A boxes with our audience to see what they wanted to know about mold. We know we talk about it, but especially coming from an inspection expert and right, because you understand remediation a lot. What a lot of
Yes.
people want to know is how do you find a remediation company that you trust? Like, where do we even begin with that? Because there's so many companies out there. How do you know? What would you look for?
Very, very good question. So the standards you want to be looking for at minimum are called the IICRC S520. It's a bunch of letters and numbers, but the IICRC S520 is the official protocol certifications for mold remediation. And at minimum, they should be certified in that. And at minimum, they should be following those protocols. I went through the course, though I never did hands-on remediation. I've done remediation oversight, been a part of many, many of them, being around there, kind of overseeing it, but not actually doing the work myself. But going through the classes as if I was a remediator was so helpful. I was the only inspector in the class. Everyone else were remediators, but it was so helpful to not just know in theory, like, oh, I've done my inspection. You should get this dealt with, and here's your protocol. Like, no, I knew the remediation protocols specific enough to say this is where containment barriers should go. This is what needs to be removed this far past the growth, following the path of the moisture. All these different, the language is very important to really dial this in because like I said, it is like a home surgery on the home. And so you want to make sure that that's, handled properly. Really a good remediation can also be set up best by the homeowner being very well versed in certain things. So do your own homework. I always tell people before you bring in professionals, do some of your own homework. It's kind of the difference between I know about how my car works and what I need done when I go to the mechanic versus just handing the keys and then they come out with a massive, oh, you got all these issues. And you're like, well, which one do I do? Which one's most needed versus which one's more optional, stuff like that. So it's very important that, and this is why I'm huge on just the awareness and education part for homeowners, because you can save a lot of time, money, and stress by doing your own homework and knowing certain aspects of the home. You don't have to be experts on it and obsess over it, but certain boxes should be checked before you even bring in a professional. The first professional to bring in would be a good inspector. So it's then vetting that inspector and working alongside them. And we can talk about kind of the pros and cons of that and how, what we don't want an inspector as well. But it's really about having the right team in place, because that inspector, if he does a good job, she does a good job and works with you on this, can then set up the remediation to be done better, because that remediator is going to be on their toes. If the inspection was done well, the protocol is written, the test results are in, all the data points are in, now the remediator is got to follow instruction. It's about executing that stuff and doing it well. So there's a kind of a accountability there. So in vetting the remediator, at minimum, they should be following those S520 protocols in remediation. You should really, like I tell people, like, have a good gut intuition feeling about them. If you feel right off the bat that like they don't take their job serious, they just want a buck, they'll be in and out, they don't understand the health aspects of it as much, just go on to the next one. Like, it's not, don't feel forced into, any one of them, doesn't matter what they say. Like, you need to be following your intuition on this. A lot of this is, do I trust this person in my home to be doing work, and do I, feel good about them and have some form of trust? If so, that's the big first box to check. And then, and really asking them about those protocols, like, will they follow them right? And are you willing to work with me that if we find anything more along the way of remediation, like you open up a wall and there's more behind it, like, how are we going to deal with that? There's a lot more to do, with that, but you just want to have those prepping calls with them and really asking about their experience and what they're committing to do with you.
I guess I got a little ahead of myself with, remediation. I went straight for the jugular, but you're right. We should backpedal a little to inspection. How do you find a good inspector? What are you looking for? What are you not looking for? testing? What tests do you want done? What tests do you not want done? That sort of thing.
Great question. This is also a gray area for the testing. So I did a basic, it's only like 10 or 12 minutes, but it's on a whiteboard. So it's a little bit more helpful. And that's a video on my Instagram that I would love people to watch, because the main three basic tests that everyone is, that the industry has right now, and I wish there was a perfect all-in-one test, there just isn't right now. And each one has their strengths and weaknesses. The same way you test a body, you could test blood, urine, saliva, hair, reflexes. Like, there's a million different ways of testing the body for different things, right? So the same way you're testing a body in many different ways to follow or to find out different information, it's the same way in testing at home. And I'll say right off the bat, a good trained eye, thorough inspection, and you could even be that trained eye as a homeowner. That's part of, knowing the history of the home, the current state of the home, what we're trying to look for, these different factors. You can find out visually things that even tests won't tell. So you have to pair every test with some of that contextual knowledge of the home, your own inspection, what you're seeing, smelling, and using your senses to check yourself. The main tests on the market right now, and I'll talk about an inspector doing this, but again, I really like to stress the homeowner, let's not just hand the keys too early to a professional if you can do a lot on the front end yourself. This is your home. You can take ownership. You don't have to be scared you're going to miss something. Get something done before bringing an inspector in, because I always loved when the homeowner, I walk in to do an inspection and the homeowner goes, hey, I knew there was water damage here. There's a funky smell in my sink here. It doesn't make me cut corners. I mean, that's because I do business with a clean conscience and always want to be very, very thorough. But it actually helps me have a good starting point, because we're trying to prioritize what's the area that's actually impacting the health of the home the most. We can go chasing down a little black spot of mold, and we're not going to get to mold free. I tell people, like, you can go chase down those little spots, but what's actually impacting the most surface area in the home and overall air quality the most? And it's the toxigenic spots where there's a source of water damage, things like that, or it's this dispersion from sources through the HVAC system, or living on top of a swamp for a crawl space, all these different factors that add to that overall concentration in the home. So for testing, the main kind of three categories is a dust collection sample, an air sample, and then a surface sample. So dust collection sample would be, you're not collecting from a source. So if you see black mold under a sink, you're not going to collect the dust there. That's more for a surface sample. I'll tell you in a bit about that one. The dust sample is literally for innocent looking household dust. You just collect throughout the home. Many would have heard of it as an ERMI. There's also an EMA. You're just collecting dust. You take that dust on a Swiffer pad, you send it to a lab, and the lab tells you what's in the dust from a mold species level. That result will come back and it will not tell you it's coming from your bathroom, it's coming from there. It's literally just saying this is what's in your dust, and it only, for the ERMI at least, 36 mold species. Well, for some context, the Aspergillus mold type has 200 or 300 plus species in itself. So there's so many molds and mold species that are not even being tested on the ERMI. So we have to know that that's one of the limitations right off the bat. However, those 36 are there for a purpose, because a lot of them are more mycotoxin producing, and those are important ones to know. So when you're doing an ERMI, you're just seeing what am I exposed to on a day-to-day level of what's just in my dust. And so then you have to pair that with where is it coming from. So people send me ERMIs all the time. Some are very stressed because it's high. First of all, you got to interpret it based on the molds there and the amounts there, not the score. I won't get into that technicality probably here, but ask me about it. Check my Instagram page. The mold like ERMI score has a ton of flaws for how it was determined, and there are, again, many, many reasons for that. Doesn't mean I throw the ERMI out entirely. It means that you have to know the molds and know the levels of the molds and start to make some sense of it with the other context of the home, like we're talking about. And the best testing strategy is a combination of tests, like we said, so we get more data points. So the ERMI is that collection. You can do it yourself, about $240 or something online to collect that dust, send it in, get the results back, and I can help with that. And other people can who are well versed in interpreting those and hopefully giving you some sort of action plan after that. Air samples are other tests. These are kind of so the health field would say that the ERMI is the gold standard for a lot of different reasons, and I can understand that. The construction, real estate, kind of inspection and remediation world would say that the air samples are the gold standard. Those have a ton of kind of weaknesses in themselves, but also some strengths. It depends, again, who's taking them, where they're taking them, why they're taking them, where they are, and understanding the strengths and limitations of them. If you guys were to take an air sample in the center of your 20-foot ceiling, living room, it's way less accurate than if you go under a sink cabinet that's got a really, musty smell and everything. It's a more concentrated area. Makes sense, right? Air samples are collecting air for those 5 minutes. They're not collecting air from yesterday, from last month. That's where the ERMI is good, because when you're collecting dust, you're collecting maybe the accumulative effect of the last month's air quality that's then settling on the surfaces, right? So we're getting a more historical reading in the ERMI as well, and air samples only a current reading of what happens to be in the air at that moment. So an air sample strategy is best when you have a reason. We want to test under this sink because it's got a bad smell and we're seeing visual evidence. Throw an air sample in there. It's a better localized test than doing an ERMI there, and also more, price efficient. Most inspectors will be doing those air samples. That's why, again, homeowners, do your own homework and then tell the inspector, where you want your air samples done. That's a very smart thing to do. Maybe they'll do additional ones, but go into those different places of your home, identify where the best bang for your buck options would be, and then tell your inspector, I want testing there, and get readings there. And then finally, long-winded, but the surface samples would be, hey, we actually found discoloration here, a very suspect, white-green textured dusting over here. We want to identify it. That's good. That's swab sample or tape sample is like presence versus absence. It's there. Send it in. It's very, there's less room for error on those because you've found the source, and or at least you're able to identify it. Air samples have those variables of what's the air like at that time. The dust collection's weaknesses is you're only collecting 10 surfaces, not all the dust in the whole home. The swab sample is good because you're going to get right on that spot. So inspector wise, they should be well versed in all of those testing strategies. A big downside of some inspections is that people will let the inspector leave in 30 minutes and with 500 of their dollars for 2 or 3 air samples and walk away. And you're like, gosh, I could have done so much more myself than that. And so don't let that happen. That's where on the vetting call, you want to be like, hey, are you going to go in my attic? Are you going to check my basement, crawl space, and be very, very thorough and really take your time to find the source, and really trying to make sure that you're stressing to them that you're hiring them to be thorough in your home, that they're, certified. Some states, only 5 or 6 states require certain state certifications as well. And so they're a little bit more serious, but for inspectors, yeah, you want to just make sure that they're well versed in this stuff, that they're going to help with the thorough inspection, the testing strategy, and the writing of a protocol according to those remediation standards.
So a lot of people asked if they were renting, what can you do there? What to look for if you're renting? Is there right, it would get pricey to do all of those tests if you're only renting. What would we suggest for that sort of person?
Like renting or buying, like if you're going into looking to move into a new place, what should you look for to say I should move in, I shouldn't move in?
Yeah, very good question. So the first test is free, and all it's going to cost, unfortunately, is some symptoms. And that is, the test is how your body feels. Go into an environment neutral and be like, very aware that my body is an antenna. It's got master intelligence that knows and feels, and especially women, they are even more dialed into their environment, and it's awesome. And so use that to your advantage, not in a fear or stress response. Just go in neutral and say, how am I feeling in this environment? What am I smelling? All those different things. And if some acute, you can know, you go into certain places and it's just got the smell or the feel that's off, or man, pay attention. Did my nose start running, or did I kind of start to get a headache or some brain fog right away? Maybe we just scoot on and you didn't have to spend much money on that one. Other people have kind of gone into the home search process and they just kind of blindly just collect the dust of the previous tenant and walk away, and whatever the ERMI says goes. That's irresponsible. Don't just collect some dust and let that dust collection make your next big life decision. So learn about what am I looking for and do your own thorough inspection. A bright flashlight, to be honest, there's all these fancy inspection tools and I like them all, but a bright flashlight is literally the best, in my opinion, the best tool when doing an inspection. You can go on my page as well. There's literally a piece of framing of wood where I took a picture and there's no flash on that picture. And then on the same piece of wood, I took the same picture, but with a flash. And the pieces of wood look radically different. The one with the flash shows this white, green, circular kind of like textured dusting. And I took a swab sample of it and condition 3 aspergillus. You're like, oh, well, that's the need for a flashlight is very, very important. So get a good bright flashlight when you're walking through to rent or to own, and just at different angles, really seeing, am I seeing a heavy dust content level here? Well, if you were to take an ERMI of that dust and send it in, it would maybe be high. We got to know certain things about the history of the home if you can. If this is a 30-year-old home, you have 30 years worth of history you're inheriting, 30 years worth of potential water damage or things that were covered up. There are issues with new builds, building errors, very tight homes, practices that are not always the best. There's a lot of factors with new homes too, of course, but you have to weigh the pros and cons of, if you're renting an old home that's been rented and there's been 20 different tenants, you're getting all of their lifestyles kind of like building up there. So with a renter, I would more lean on the side of newer if possible. But there's definitely upsides of older homes too. They're not built as tight, which means the humidity would not spike as much and stay in there. The home's allowed to breathe. Fresh air is the best air. So definitely introduce, I tell people this on maintenance strategies, definitely introduce like fresh air from outside and natural light. Mold needs dark, damp, stagnant air. So if a house has been sitting for 3 years, no one's living in there, nature kind of goes, no one's living here. We're nature's decomposer. We're going to go in and we're going to live there and recycle this, material and mold's going to just spike because there's no life there. It's very important when you go into a new home, get a lot of natural light in there. Mold is not, when we look outside, mold is not just taking over the world, taking these buildings out, right? There's a natural, like, moisture goes up, rain happens, it dries out naturally, and there's a beautiful balance in ecology and nature. We want that in our home. And so that means good airflow, good circulation, fresh air, light, and activity, in the home is going to really help a lot. So when you're going into a rental, doing your own inspection is very important. If you do want to do testing, you could do an ERMI, but just know those strengths and weaknesses and what your goals are. And I wouldn't put, all of your decision on just what those are. I would definitely have someone well-versed in interpreting them with you. Maybe you could get the at-home air sample test kits and say, I'm going to go to, after my inspection, I'm going to go to those certain areas that could be like yellow flag areas. And I want to go and actually get a reading of those. That could be a way as well. But yeah, when renting, you really need to trust your own self and your own inspection, and then say, as a renter, I can't control everything, but I'm going to do as much as I can within my control and be at least the things I can't. So maybe air purification, dehumidification, you can definitely control those too. How clean the house is. I tell everyone, even going into a brand new home, deep clean on your way in. Like, clean your stuff, but also clean the previous environment of all the, like, try to get it as dust free as possible. Take a HEPA vacuum. We can talk about that. And then a damp wipe down, and really get the house as clean slate as you can before moving in.
So you brought up what I wanted to talk about next, which is air purifiers. Do they actually help? What types help? What types don't really do much? If you're stuck living in mold, right, you can't break your lease, you don't have the finances. Is that what you should be doing?
That is it definitely is more of a Band-Aid, and it's more of my opinion that it's a good maintenance strategy. So, like, I think I mentioned the mold timeline video that I made on my Instagram page, but the goal is to progress through mold and get to our goal, which is maintain and move on. Don't stay in the loop of obsessing over mold for 5-10 years of your life unless you have a purpose in the industry like you guys are doing to educate and like bring some solutions. But for the everyday homeowner to just be like constantly obsessive, like what's behind my walls all the time, get your home to as good as you can within your control, make those solutions happen, and then figure out how do I really keep my body in homeostasis, heal my body, and learn about my body? I always try to tell people, have a good balance of learning about the body and the environment, and having a good approach to heal and maintain both. So with the home environment, the goal is to maintain and move on. And in that maintenance strategy, it's monitor humidity, keeping levels below 55% consistently. And then if it's not there, you may have to, especially in basements and everything, you have to put dehumidifiers in there. So humidity is one thing we can definitely control in the home. And then doing your own inspections in the house, also that's part of that maintenance strategy. Air purifiers is another one where it's going to help the circulation in the home. It's going to clean the ambient air. It's not going to go and clean surfaces for you. You got to do that manually yourself, but it's going to clean the ambient air and circulate those. And you want to pick one that is a little bit above and beyond just a HEPA filter. HEPA filter is going to do some to keep your air clean, but you know, these other technologies like Air Doctor's got the ultra fine HEPA filter plus a, you know, carbon VOC filter, and IntelliPure is like the Ferrari of it, you know, the highest cost, but like really, really good. The IQ Air, Austin Air, Air Oasis, all good options. But as a renter, yeah, it's something to invest in to clean that ambient air a little bit and lower the overall concentration in the home. Like they say, the best solution to pollution is dilution. So it's going to help the diluting process, but it's not a little remediator for you. It's more of a maintenance strategy to, you know, keep the good air quality.
So that was a lot of brands, and I'm glad you said that so that people have like ideas of which ones to look for and what to look for. So what if you can't move out? What if, like I said, do you just do air filters and try and, you know, reduce the amount of mold in your body? Or
good question.
You know, I had to move in with a friend, right? Like I couldn't. I was covered in a full body rash for months.
Wow.
And I was like, well, friend, now my boyfriend. It worked out, right? It worked out for everyone involved.
Yeah.
But it
Wow.
just, I got lucky. His roommate moved out. I moved in with him because I could not physically live in that environment anymore. And I know that not everyone's that fortunate, but if they're not, what's the situation?
That was one of the questions. Like, if you cannot move from mold immediately, like what are your must do's?
Great question. Yeah, if your body's screaming at you and you know, here's the biggest test. Do I feel significantly better when I'm out of the house versus when I'm in the house? And if you're in the house and you're feeling like that, you have to follow, like, you got to do what you got to do in that. If you truly can't, then best solution to pollution is dilution. How do we dilute this best we can? And fresh air, natural light, dehumidification, air purification, and then deep cleaning the house with a HEPA vacuum and a damp wipe down will start to lower those levels a bit. If you have an active mold source that you're aware of, let's just go back to under the sink. It's the easiest one. It happens way too much. So check under sinks, guys. If the, you know, you have like so many rental properties too, it's terrible that they don't handle it well, or they just paint over it if the leak happened. But if you know there's a source there, don't open it. You can tape seal it if you need to like try to contain it as much as possible. There still will be a level of exposure, but identifying those spots, avoiding them if there are those more, you know, smoking gun areas where you know of that. The HVAC system, for instance, like is a big one that if you're inheriting a home that's 20 years old and the HVAC system is 20 years old and you got 20 years of history blowing through there, and you get in there with a flashlight and you see thick, heavy dust content, discoloration in there, every time you kick the system on, it's distributing throughout the home. So that's where you have to clean the house, but maybe you don't even use the HVAC system. And if you don't use the HVAC system, you have to make sure that humidity levels are low and circulation is still up in a different way. The HVAC system is very, very important. No one just go turn off your system just because you're scared and let the air be stagnant and damp. I've literally had people leave for a week and they turn their system off and the fan off, and they come back and there was literally mold like everywhere on clothes. It was crazy. So like, again, you need to keep circulation and ventilation happening in the home. And that's a big reason why a lot of homes have good ventilation through the attic and different places, and why, you know, to open the windows. But the HVAC system does that, and that forced air to exchange it is very, very important. But if the HVAC system's in terrible shape, had a lot of people say, I'm just going to not use it at all and turn it off, and that's going to you know, help it from being forced, you know, everywhere. And you still have to kind of more manually dehumidify and circulate the air so that it's a decent environment. You got to do what the HVAC system would have done if you were using it. It's a bit technical. I don't want to get like too much deeper into that one, but you need to identify where those sources are. And there's a lot of different environmental factors. I know we're talking about the 4-letter M word today, but there's a lot of environmental factors: carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, radon, asbestos or lead. Asbestos and lead is pre-1978. Just be aware of that for older homes. Don't go just HGTV, ripping up homes if it's pre-1978. If you haven't checked for asbestos and lead, you don't want to disturb that stuff. It can cause a whole host of issues as well. So doing your own, checks that way, and doing as much as you can within your control to try to mitigate that. If you really can't leave, like I mentioned before, dehumidify, circulate the air, maybe air purification, and then deep cleaning of the home and trying to identify those source areas and lower those.
Yeah, I know. I personally lived in old homes, and that's what ended up being moldy for me. And you have to sign like in your lease, you have to sign something about lead-based paint because it was built pre-1978. So like, that's also just always, if it's in your lease, like, yeah, it might be a little bit suspect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm like, sure, the hindsight's 2020 for me, right? Like, I know that there were like in the corners, they had painted over all the mold spots that I didn't find till later when it rained and all that stuff. And then I was like, yeah, it was a whole mess, because then I was like, okay, so what are you going to do about it? And they were like, well, we patched up the roof and we're going to come paint. And I'm like, well, what about what's inside the roof?
Right.
And they're like, well, we're not going to reopen it now. And I'm like, okay, so I'm just going to live with this.
Yeah. Wow. That's bad practice there.
I know.
The industry needs a lot of justice.
Yeah. Landlords are not always the most understanding people.
Yeah, that's why we got to get the information out, the awareness up on the health impacts of it. Maybe that will drive the ship a bit more than just they think it's aesthetic or just functionality of the home. It's much, much more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's why this education is so important, because had I known all of that, I mean, this was like 7 years ago now. Had I known all of that, I mean, I probably would have thought twice about renting the places I did. And we eventually moved into a new build because I was like, I need to and like you said, there are problems with new builds too, but I was like, we need to have as little as possible, because there are lots of historic old homes where I live, and I just couldn't live in another historic old home again.
Yeah, that's right. That's good. Yeah. As a renter, if something does happen, document everything very thoroughly. That's huge. Like if a leak happens or something's starting to form, like snap pictures, video, document, send the email out so that you have email, tracing back to a certain date or whatever, that you're notifying the landlord of something happening. Like, don't let them put it back on you for negligence or whatever. Obviously you want to do your checks on the way in, but if you're living there and something happens, you've got to document everything. That hopefully you don't get to, attorneys and everything, but if you do, the documentation is hugely important. There are some lawyers that are really, spearheading some things for mold situations for people, but the tenant rights are not as favorable right now. There's a resource on gotmold.com called the Renter's Playbook. That's a nice piece of information for people to educate themselves on as well.
Oh, I love that. You're giving us all these resources that I know I'm going to look up and tell clients about and everything, because it's like, it's just a huge industry and there's so much question in it, right? People being like, what's best practice? What's the best test? What's the best to do for this? So I'm like, all these resources are just as great as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We had someone ask out, is it a must to move out to fully heal your body?
I hate to say it depends, but it really does. Like, you've got to be working with a health practitioner who's literate in this stuff and who's like helping with that process. It's best to have a team approach to it. You've got to follow your body and what it's telling you on this. But think of the fish and fishbowl analogy you guys have probably talked about before. Like, you really can only heal the fish so much if the aquarium is filthy. It's just there may be a block there, but also give your body a lot of credit for its intelligence and its resilience. That if you give it what it needs and remove the interferences, our bodies are made to heal. They really are. So one of those interferences is definitely the environmental side, which is what we're talking about. But don't focus so much on your environment being everything, and meanwhile you're drinking, little to no water, crappy water, terrible diet, no good lifestyle. Is like, please don't blame your whole, health situation on just what might be in your environment, when we know what is going on or not going on in your lifestyle and body, right? So it's definitely a balance in that. And I always like to tell people, don't put 90% of your attention on the home environment if it's only going to give you 10% return on your health investment. So really, again, having that balance to know, heal the body, heal the home, and work with a practitioner who knows where your body's really at, with the testing of it and different symptoms. But the overall answer would be yes, like leaving the environment, you're going to probably heal quicker and more effectively. But also, when someone says I'm living in a moldy home, well, one person's moldy home is way worse than someone else's. And I'm living in mold. Well, is living in mold in ERMI that's got a couple species that are a little bit high and overall you're in a pretty good shape? Or is living in a moldy home like some of these situations that you're talking about, or just, it's just like crazy burden on the body. So yes, the more you get that burden of the environmental burden lower, then your body can heal much, much quicker, is my experience. But
yeah,
like we talked about,
no,
like we talked about at the beginning, some people are way more affected by it than other people too. You can have two people living in the same home, and one is going to feel super sick and have all these problems, and the other one is not going to notice anything. Because I see that a lot in like relationships where either the husband or the wife, is super sick and they're convinced that it's from mold, and the other person's like, well, I don't notice anything,
and they don't believe them.
Yeah, it can't be mold. I don't believe you, because I would be sick too.
Exactly. Good, Emily. That's exactly what I missed that part as well. That's people's sensitivities, their overall, like, the state of their body, and then, why they're sensitive in different ways is a big key component to it. But yeah, I mean, I've had that happen often. That's why if you want to communicate about mold with someone who's not really sold on the fact that it could be an issue, a couple analogies right off the bat is the fish and fishbowl one, like I just said, but also why can one person go outside in the pollen and be totally lick the pollen off the rails outside and be fine, and the other person like is sneezing like crazy. And so we all have these different kind of allergenic responses, but then also the types that show up, we might have different sensitivities to as well, like Stachybotrys chaetomium, that can do a ton more systemic, and certain mycotoxin producing molds, certain systemic things throughout the body that one person may not feel it right now, but may feel it later in life. Another analogy I have is if you were 4 years old and bit by a Doberman retriever, maybe at age 24, your body is a little bit more highly sensitive to when the Doberman walks around the corner, right? Because you've already had the previous, experience. And so if you had previous exposures with mold of different types or amounts, then yes, your body might be more heightened and sensitive to that as well. And so we just have to be understanding with people. And I tell husbands often that, or boyfriends, that the woman is oftentimes that first radar, and we have to, like, they're an extension of our senses and listening that we really, really have to listen to, because there's just a lot more bodily and sensory intelligence there that we have to like honor and listen to. And it's a great gift in a lot of ways. So
yeah, I think men notice that, they just don't pay attention. Because like my husband will be like allergies and nose running and coughing and a headache, and he's like, no, I'm fine, we're
and he's
fine.
fine. Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
like, I'm like, no, you're not fine.
yeah
But yeah,
I also think it plays a role in that toxin bucket, right? Because everyone's exposed to different toxins, and a lot of people don't realize that mine might be higher than yours. That's why I'm impacted by mold, right? It's overflowing right now. I got covered in a full body rash, whereas my boyfriend pretty much lived with me and he was fine. Didn't really see any issues. And meanwhile, I can barely function on a daily basis. It was a very different experience, but as much as I had been addressing those toxins, I wasn't able to empty the bucket fast enough, right? Like we're continuing to work on my drainage pathways and everything, but at the same time, I'm taking in way more because I'm just more sensitive.
Yes. 100% right. You guys are on it.
And I also want to talk a little bit about drainage. One, I love drainage. Everyone knows that the drainage pathways, pooping, lymphatic drainage, your liver, all that stuff. But people ask like, what can I do while I'm living in mold? And I'm like, you can address your drainage pathways, how quickly you're getting rid of toxins, because
Yes.
the reason mold's such a big issue is it produces those mycotoxins, an immunosuppressant, mitochondrial suppressant. It also can impact those epithelial cells in the liver. So it can impact your ability to remove toxins.
Yes.
So that's why we have to make sure that your drainage pathway is open, working as best as possible before. I mean, if you can't move out, right? There's other things you can do in the short term to decrease that toxin bucket as much as possible so that, like you said, you can heal a lot faster.
Yes. Yeah. Get outside. Like, don't be what the EPA says we're spending 90% of our time indoors when your indoor environment's like not helping the process, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, enjoy life outside, and that's I agree with everything you just said. And there's so much bodily intelligence and resilience, and taking care of our environment is a huge part of it, but the internal environment is huge as well.
Yeah. And like you said, I think that people don't listen to their bodies enough. Like when you walk into mold, because I had such a negative experience, I have a mold sensor. I'll walk into a hotel and be like, I don't want to stay here. This is gross. Like, this is really bad, or something like that. But a lot of people won't even listen to the, like, do you feel like you can't breathe as well? Does it smell even musty? Right? Like those sort of just like tiny little things
Yes.
mean a lot.
Yeah. Even the smell itself is a VOC that is not healthy. Like the actual odor. So that's very important to know also, that if you're smelling it all the time, like that actual odor is not just a sign that mold is maybe there, but the odor itself could cause some issues. So yeah, just that's why we have that sense as well. And just lost what I was going to say. Go to the next thing. I'll remember.
I was really just going to ask about how you've seen it. Have you seen it manifest in terms of like respiratory illness? I know I have. I had sinus infections my whole entire life, lots of respiratory issues in my family. And that's why I'm like, my family grew up in mold. If you look at like the health issues that my whole family has, like it was mold. But have you seen it manifest in terms of respiratory issues?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, there's kind of the distinction between mold allergy versus mold illness. And the mold allergy, kind of, I think of it as the upper respiratory like symptoms. It's kind of lung up. The mold illness could be that longer term suppressant. It's affecting the gut, systemic joint pain, all this, stuff. But yes, totally. I mean, in the sinus cavities and with, brain fog and all that stuff. And then yes, with respiratory stuff as well. There's going to be some exposure to everybody for their life. It's just, I always like to say, let's not let the accumulative effect happen in our recycled air boxes, our homes, where these mold levels are going to just overburden us for long periods of time. I really believe the accumulation effect is a huge part of all this. I mean, if you're in it, like, again, when I was doing inspections and I'm in there for a few hours and I leave, like, oh my gosh, that was rough. I can't believe people live there. But I go home, hit the sauna binder, do what I know to do a lot of different ways. And, I'm on my way and I'm good. That's awesome. I hope that's everyone's experience, that, if it does impact you, that you can kind of like recover quickly in that way. But that's not everyone. Obviously, sometimes people can have an acute exposure. It takes a little bit longer than that. But that's all the factors we just talked about with different sensitivities. But it's the how long term, have you been in that, is also a huge part of this. That build up in the lungs, that build up in the sinuses, or this respiratory stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, actually, one quick story. Won't go too much on this one, but man, a lawyer called me, said, go into this apartment. We're hiring you to check it. I got in there, and the guy was 29 years old, in the hospital on oxygen. And so the house is empty, and his friend lets me in. I go in, I'm like, how the heck I get hit? Like, just, it was like someone poisoned this little apartment. And so I walk in there and I'm like, this is horrific. And that's the only inspection I probably only took 20 minutes on. I put my mask on, ran through that place, and I opened the door in the master bedroom. There's the HVAC closet, and it's basically raining in there. The whole thing is black. Like, no one would ever think to live there, guys. Like, so don't think your house has this issue. You'll know, like, it's a poison box. And so walking through there, take my air samples, but I'm like, I'm just going to swab all these spots. I can visually see this. This is a massive issue, and the smell is horrific, and it's like damp in the whole house. I'm like, how are you living here? Well, he wasn't very aware, unfortunately, but he was starting to get these really, really gnarly symptoms, coughing, lung, all this stuff. Doesn't know, thinks it's COVID, goes to the hospital. They put him on oxygen, say, well, yeah, it might be COVID as well, and just stay in your home for the next 7 days on oxygen. So he's stuck in there. It gets 10 times worse. He's in the hospital getting like lung, like surgery. I mean, the dude had insane amounts of lung issues, and God, it got so bad. Like I got the results back, gave it to lawyer. Lawyer calls me, says, call the mom, and she goes, there, he's on a ventilator. 29 years old. So I go in there. He's not conscious. I, pray over him, talk with the mom and friend and everything. I'm like, this is intense. Like, but with this type of environment, I don't care how strong or young you are. Like, you stick someone in a poison box, like they're going to be impacted. This was rough. I would have been in the same boat if you stuck me in there for 7 days. And yeah, so that didn't help at all. He ended up getting off the ventilator a week or two later, and just an amazing story that he's okay now and out of that environment. But that was intense. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that he made it out. Yeah,
I know. I was waiting for the end of that story.
I was expecting the worst. I was like, yeah,
I was like,
very happy he's okay now. But my God, that was crazy.
That's why I say the shutdowns were a blessing in disguise for me, because I had like small little, they called it just an eczematous rash. And I was like, okay, I already had been working on my health at this point. So I'm like, why the heck am I getting eczema? And then all the shutdowns happened, and I lived in my house. So I was like, perfect. I'm going to get better because I won't have to wear shirts. So like, it won't rip it open, all that stuff. And I got so much worse. It grew and grew and grew. And I was like, this has got to be something. Like, my whole body, I'm lotioning it regularly. Everything's clean. And then I just moved in with my boyfriend, and it started to go away. As soon as I did that and I focused on drainage, I was focusing on just making sure that my body was properly detoxing whatever the heck was inside of it, because I didn't have a mold protocol at the time. I didn't know all of that right the way I know as much as I do now. But focusing on that was able, like, right 2 months later, I had no more rashes, and I don't get rashes anymore. Like, it was just out of nowhere.
That's crazy.
And it was a very musty, disgusting apartment, and I knew it. I just only had a month to find an apartment, and I was like, well, we're going to cross our fingers, and we don't spend much time here anyways. And then, of course, all the shutdowns happened. So
wow.
Not my best
perfect
decision.
Storm there, but I mean, the shutdowns definitely had those who were wanting to learn. They learned a ton in that time. I'll just say that.
Yeah. And I also think
good amount of time to take a break and learn.
Oh my gosh. I was going to say, fear is really important when it comes to mold too, because there are people like me, right? I had heightened senses to mold because I had such a huge impact to my health that every time I would get in mold, I would start to get paranoid. And I'm obviously much better now, right? But you get paranoid, you worry about things, and then it's going to manifest in the body. Let's just be real. Your mind is so much more powerful than we think it is.
Yes.
So let's be real. As much as you have to neutralize your environment, you have to neutralize your mind. Because if you're looking for a symptom every day, you're going to find it.
You will find it 100%. Very, very well said. Yeah, I tell people this is very simple, but wherever you are right now, go look for the color red. You can even do it now if you'd like. You're dialed in, you're finding it, and every other color goes blank, right? Because I told you red, power of suggestion. Your mind takes that in and computes for red, and it's drawn to it. So again, if you're going around our whole life looking for whatever that suggestion is, we're going to literally be blind to other things. And that's where it's very, very important to have a practice of stillness, and you would call whatever meditation, mindfulness, this and that. My way I like to say it is really disentangling from the nervous system so that we can observe our life before we absorb it. And that was the biggest kind of like realization I had during 2020. It's like, everything that's happening, don't absorb it too quick, be the observer of it. And it's really, really important to do that. Because if you start to add that energy, and where your attention goes, energy flows, and you start to add that attention to all this stuff, you will go right up into that fight or flight or freeze state, and dysregulate the body, take much longer. I could make myself sick in the next 24 hours with thought alone. So it's like we're all on the brink of all types of stuff. However, if we know and trust our body to show us these things, and we know its power and strength to do that and heal like it's made to, then you can go in with a lot more peace. And it's very, very important to like find the solutions and act on the solutions, and not let the paralysis of analysis, kick in and just, I don't want to do the wrong things. You do nothing. Meanwhile, life is going on and you're doing nothing. So I always really like to tell people, like, you can learn all this stuff, but as soon as you know mold is an issue and you're not needing convinced on that, all you should be focused on is how to solve it now. Like, the solution process should be where your focus goes. So many people get obsessed with, well, oh, could it also cause this thing and cause that thing? The symptom list is off the charts because we're all so bio-individual, and they keep adding a new symptom to the list of 55 that mold could potentially correlate with. It's like, guys, it's an issue. So let's find the sources, solve the issue, learn about the body, heal that, and be stronger for the days ahead, and believe in healing and see our life as a healed life. Because some people also are kind of comfortable living in the endorphin and adrenaline release of the stresses and sicknesses and anxieties of life, and they wouldn't know what to do with themselves if they actually lived in peace and equal. I'm not going to go on much further on this, but that's a very, very important part, is really who we are and how we are keeping our body, temple, and our mind in just alignment and peace, and more of a state of power, rather than giving it away to everything left and right.
I feel like we end up touching on that in every single episode somehow.
It's important.
It's just like, come on, guys. This piece is so important to your health. So yeah.
They're gonna get it by now. If every single guest we bring on that doesn't know, you guys all don't know each other, you don't know who's gonna be on the podcast. If every single guest is like, the point is to just become the healed person, they're gonna get it. It's gonna click.
Yeah.
That's awesome, because there was no prompt for that to even come up, but it must be Courtney and Emily and who you all are, that you draw that forth from the guests, if they're all saying that. And that's awesome, because you attract what you are. And that's really cool, because that's a big passion of mine, is to like really empower the people. Like, it's very important to take care of the environment, but I could make so much money fear mongering people and making them mold obsessed, and I would be really like doing life with a very unclean conscience that way. Personally, I could never and will never do that. But that's just no way to live. Like, we can solve this stuff and progress and move forward. So
yeah.
And so tell us about your resource. I want to hear all about it.
So hopefully it's done in the next week or two. I keep saying that because I keep expanding it. It keeps getting better and better, and more ideas go, and it's awesome. But I basically said, if I had to not talk about mold ever again, what would I put, on there to leave people with? So for the newest person, it's going to be really like, it's going to be comprehensive, but it's going to be basic enough where you're going to find yourself in it. Where are you? Are you a renter? Are you in this situation? Are you vetting a remediator? Like, all the language that we're talking about today is going to be there. And for you guys, I'll say the name of it. I haven't released it yet, but it's called The Mold Handbook, and "the" stands for tactical, honest, and empowering. And the goal is really to make sure that if you know a little bit about mold or a lot about mold, it's going to be something that you can go to and find yourself in it wherever you are in the mold timeline of, just in the exploratory investigative process, testing, inspection, remediation, done with remediation on the rebuild side, or in that maintain and move on. There's just going to be resources for everybody in there. And so that handbook is going to be great. It's going to be for everybody. It's going to be affordable, but it's going to literally save thousands and thousands of dollars of potential issues in the future. And if you have that on hand, you will not be one of those who hire 3 inspectors and call me after and say, I wasted money on 3 inspectors because they were in too quick. And you'll know your stuff, before doing that, and you'll really have a good game plan moving forward. And so that's going to be coming out pretty soon. Very, very excited about that. But my Instagram page has a lot of good interviews I've done like this, and with other great health practitioners. I do one-on-one consultations with people, so that if they need me for a quick, good bang for your buck, one call, and we get a lot accomplished and set you on your way. There's that, lower cost option. Then there's one where I'm more involved, do more homework and follow up with you. And then there's one where I'm with you every step of the way for a long, period of time as well. And those can really help, so that, again, we're putting our investment in the right place. There's a lot out there. Mold can get expensive for sure, but that's why I like to help people with, let's prioritize what's actually going to be the best use of our money so that we get a return on our investment for our health and not hit the law of diminishing returns. And now we're spending so much money, and really we could have spent a quarter of that amount of money and gotten what we needed to, as far as like from a health standpoint and effectiveness on the home.
Yeah, your handbook sounds great, I think, because people are always asking me, like, where do I start? Where do I go? What do I do? So that'll be a really good resource to send to them. And we'll link that in the show notes when it's out. Hopefully it's out, by the time the podcast comes out. But if not, we'll go back and add it, and then we'll
thank you. Yeah,
share it as
great.
well.
You too get it for free.
Okay, awesome. Do you travel? Like, I know you said you were located in Fort Worth, right? Fort Worth, Texas.
Yeah.
Do you travel for like remediations and stuff? Because I have a lot of, obviously, since I'm in Texas too, I have a lot of Texas followers from all over, and even like out of state. I know that they would probably be interested in your services at some point or another.
I'm not doing as many in-person inspections, unfortunately. Done hundreds of them, and still, would love to. That's not as much of where my time is going, is for inspections. If I need to, I will. Again, there are certain state, like I don't have my Texas license because I just moved here, but Texas is one of about 5 states that needs certain state certifications as well. But again, that's where I do help with the vetting of inspectors and remediators, and even having calls with them so that there's like more accountability and oversight in that. Case by case basis, just let me know. See what we can do. But we can't accomplish a lot virtually. I do a lot of, hey, walk me around your home, and that's not everything, but it's we can get a lot accomplished virtually, a lot more than we may think. There's a lot of at-home tests. We get those strategies. Obviously, the in-person inspection is going to fill in all those other gaps, but work with what we can now and try to involve the right team.
Yeah, I think just having somebody that people feel like they can trust to talk to, which obviously is you. So I think that would be very helpful for a lot of people too.
And every situation's a bit different, but like I've had so many conversations with remediators, and they know that the client hired me. And so the remediator's not going to, go to the next step until they do a FaceTime with me. And that's like, that helps a lot. Really make sure that everyone's really on point. Remediators really are busy, stressed out people for the most part, and they're dealing with mold every day. And so dealing with mold every day can have their own health issues. I would love to educate remediators so that they're taking care of themselves, and in turn, they'll be taking care of the clients, right? If they do a better job. But sometimes they cut corners because they're so darn tired and stressed. I know the industry on that. And that's why certain clients, if you know your stuff and you put them on their toes, they're not going to cut those corners. They're going to really do things to a T. Should they every single time? Yes. But if you're an empowered homeowner and you know this stuff, you're going to get a much more on point remediation where they're like, okay, this is a client that we need to be very, tight about.
Right.
Yeah, and if they even just follow you and look at a lot of the resources you have on your Instagram, they're going to be a lot more educated than they were when they
100%
first started. Yeah.
And not the fear stuff, guys. Like if you already know mold's an issue, you're not going to hear from me the other new 10 symptoms that it can cause, or just like, again, I don't like put all the spotlight on the problems of mold. I assume you already know mold can be an issue. So I put the spotlight on the solutions and how to progress through this thing and actually take steps, because if 90% of your focus is on the issues with mold and only 10% on the solutions, you will stay in that thing for a while and your health will feel it.
Yeah. There's only so much more information you need to take in about it being an issue when you already know that it's a problem.
Yeah. And anyone can learn about mold. Like you can learn about that timeline of how it's, how to progress through it and then how to move on. So, just want to help people maintain peace of mind throughout the process. And mold can be quite the teacher, because you went through what you went through and now look what you're doing. It's awesome. I always like to attach this stuff, like our pains turning to our purpose, whatever you want to call it, where you've went through this and now you've learned so much. Now you're like, oh my gosh, body, I'm so sorry I ignored you, or I, pushed your voice aside in so many ways. Like now I'm learning about the body, but then I'm learning about the home, and then my neighbor has an issue and I can actually empower them now with, hey, at least, do this. So mold coming to us is like, don't waste your hardship. Like, use this thing, progress through it, and see it as a total blessing, because it really, really can be. As sucky as the process might be in the middle of it, afterwards you're like, wow, that really actually turned to a lot of good.
And that's why we both ended up here, right? Because we went through issues that we learned a lot about, and we're like, okay, well, time to help other people with it because we've amassed all this knowledge, not for naught.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes. And if you don't have a place to offload it, you're more stressed. It's all in you, and you're thinking it's only your home you got to go look around in. But meanwhile, all that knowledge you have might be, your neighbor's home that needs that. So
Exactly.
Right.
Do you have
Yeah.
anything left you want to ask him? I feel like we covered so much.
Yeah, we did. There was one question actually, I think that
Okay.
I wanted to ask yet. Somebody wanted to know, when you're moving out of mold, is there any items that are salvageable? Like, is there anything
yeah.
that you can take?
The main question, oh my gosh, the biggest gray area and the biggest one. And it really is that one in the back of a lot of people's mind that causes them the most fear. Is like, oh my God, do I have to get rid of all my stuff? Maybe I don't even want to go down this mold journey because I don't even want the proposition that I have to get rid of, all my contents. It's a case by case basis. How moldy and toxigenic is the home it's coming from is the first thing. How sensitive is another thing. Do you even need some of these things right off the bat is what I tell people, especially with the porous items. Have you had this, couch for 15 years and it was handed down? And you're like, it was junk anyway, like get rid of it. Okay. Do what my wife did and go into the closet and say, would I wear these things on, my first 1 or 2 dates with you? It's like, no, toss it. So
I
already
like that question.
yeah, it's a good one,
Yeah.
right? It really helps filter a lot of things out. And so with your porous items, the stuff that, upholstery, clothing, things like that, that's the stuff that you need to really make some decisions on throwing away or not. That's going to hold a lot more microbial history and be much tougher to clean. If we're just assuming, there might be mold on this stuff, I don't know, but your house wasn't that moldy prior, you're not that sensitive, maybe we can clean and save that via, EC3 laundry additive solution to do the clothing stuff. And then maybe you can HEPA vacuum best you can on different porous items. But when you're getting rid of stuff, it's more of the porous items that you're more looking to get rid of. Unless you're semi-porous and non-porous items, plastic, metal, wood, all this stuff, the harder surfaces, you can most times clean and save that. Unless there's a lot of mold like embedded into it, then you may need to toss it. But many times there are cleaning measures, and talk to me on that about how to really do it. But HEPA vacuum, peroxide, heavy duty peroxide, all that. There's ways to get those cleaned. And the hard surface stuff, most times, like I said, you can get them cleaned and saved and not have to toss everything. All the horror stories of like, we got rid of every single thing. I was like, well, you were just misinformed that you didn't need to get rid of your glass. Like that was just mold that sat on top of it and you could have just cleaned it. So it's just important to know, again, how moldy is the house, how moldy is the stuff, how sensitive are you, how toxigenic are the molds that you're leaving, and is this also causing a nice spring cleaning where you're going to get rid of things anyway? That's going to take a lot of, again, mold's a teacher. It sucks, but it's a teacher. And so let mold be the teacher before the pain teacher comes in and makes the pain even worse, until you learn that as well. Learn that one from Paul Check, for anyone who hasn't heard about the pain teacher. But so the contents are tough. I like to really help people with their situation, like sorting those, but those are the 3 categories. And best solution to pollution is dilution, like I said. So how do we dilute our stuff as best we can and really weigh the pros and cons of replacing something versus keeping it? And mattresses, for instance, if you're spending 8 hours a night on there and you have a big question about it and it's old and you have all these different, list of things that could be a problem with it, you're waking up not feeling good every morning, let's try to invest in a new mattress. But again, it's a case by case basis on contents.
Mm-hmm.
I also always tell people, if you're paranoid enough to the point where it is making you think about it every single day, it's probably worth it to get rid of it. Yeah. I felt that way about my carpet. It was like $100 carpet. And I was like, oh my God, is it moldy? Is it not? And I was freaking out. And my boyfriend's like, well, it was $100. So we're going to get a new one. And I was like, I needed that. I really needed someone to tell me that, because I can tell other people till I'm blue in the face. But if it's making you paranoid about it,
exactly,
I would definitely consider it, because
very
like we
well
talked about the mind. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very well said. Yeah. Good stuff.
I know. That was good. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell people where they can find you once more.
Yeah. Instagram is the main place I'm hanging out, at Mold Authority Live. Maybe rebranding soon. But good resources there. And you can reach out to me even at Melrose Health Consulting at gmail.com. And we'll have a lot of new things coming up and new resources, but would love to help wherever you are in that journey. If you need interpretations on lab results or guidance through the process, or hey, we're about to get this remediation quote. Does it look good? What do we need versus not? What can be maybe skipped? Anywhere you are in the process, but go watch some of those videos, especially the ones in front of the whiteboard on my page, and those could be really helpful starts for you. And just be empowered. Know that like you really can get these solutions and do so much more before even bringing in a professional, and that your body can and will heal, and not to waste this process. This process of going through mold or learning about it is going to cause a lot of good if you choose to see it in that light. And if you've already been through it, proud of you. Go give away your knowledge and help the next person.
I love your perspective so much.
Me
I'm
too.
so glad you're on here. This is such a good podcast.
Yes, it really, really was. I think everybody's going to really enjoy that. And we will leave all your links down below too, so people can access that. Definitely go check out his Instagram, because I was looking through it just before we got on the podcast, and there is a ton of information there. So yeah,
all those little story highlights, gosh, there's so much on there. Like it's the Q&As, the like just need hope and healing and like some spiritual perspective. I get little nudges from the spirit to write something, and every time someone messaged, that one was for me, I was like, okay, well, that's why I posted it. So there's like 2 or 3 little highlights with a lot of just life-giving words for you, that's going to really, really change the perspective on the inside, and it's going to help everything navigating on the outside. But then there's live look-ins where I've been doing inspections and kind of brought you along with me on those. Those are kind of fun. And yeah, there's a lot of good resources there. But you guys are great. Thank you. Like we could probably do a whole nother hour on like other topics.
Sure.
Like
maybe we'll just
hold on the shelf and learn and talk about it like a million different things. I can sense that. So
maybe we'll just have to have you back for another episode at some point. So
that'd be fun.
Yeah, this was really great. I loved it a lot.
I did too.
You guys are great. Thank you. I know that all you do is effective, and you're going to have just an amazing year ahead of like great growth in your personal lives and in this podcast. And whether you see all the fruit of your labor or not, just know that it's happening and it's out there. And the more people who apply what you guys do, they're going to get their lives changed. So
thank you. We appreciate that.
You're so kind.
I know your energy is just like, it's so good. Such a good energy.
It's refreshing. And like you said, with like mold, there could be so much fear mongering, and like your energy from literally the opposite perspective is just so refreshing and great.
Yeah. Like you were saying about your highlights, I was like, that's what people need to see surrounding this subject. I feel like, because like you said, everybody sees the fear aspect of it, all the symptoms, and you just need that positivity. So I really love that you're putting that out there.
I've gotten actually angry at times where like when I see people pushing the fear so hard, and they're just wanting to get extra bucks or extra that heightened emotional response for a lot of ways, and I'm like, maybe I'm even losing money at times for not doing it. Fair enough. Like I can't do that in good conscience. I really love and care for people and know that our minds are fragile, and you have a life to live way beyond me making you a mold obsessed person. So like that's like sparked that. But also like you say I have a good energy, but I've like come from extreme fear, living like hating myself, very much hating myself, hating others, got into drugs, like lived totally lost. I thought I'd be dead by the age of 24, and here I am like about to turn 30. And so I've had a life of overcoming, and the power of God within me being way stronger than whatever is around me. And so that's why I believe in all of you, because I've myself been through some of those, and I just simply believe that things can change in a moment. I really do.
I love that so much.
It's huge.
I think that
we got way more than we were even bargaining for.
That was all, like I said, every single one of our episodes goes into the emotional side of things.
Everyone needs to hear it.
We love that. But I think that is a really good place to end it. So thank you again so much for coming on. And
thank you.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to love this podcast. It was so good. Thank you so much. Yeah, because everyone just needs to know all about everything we talked about.
Thank you. You guys are awesome. First class. On my Linktree, there's a $10 resource called Breath Rhythms, and it's my favorite 10 breath exercises for like peace and relaxation, whatever. And so if that's a good place for someone to say, you know what, before I even start all the stressful journey, I'm going to get really still and learn. Like there's a lot in that resource. It's not just 10 exercises, a lot of other good information there, and a 5-hour long playlist attached. Go do that. $10, best $10 you'll spend. Breathe, relax, get empowered, and then go move into the next step with mold.
I love breathwork, so I'll link that below. That sounds
Awesome.
great. All right.
You guys are great. Let's be in touch. Thank you.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
Yes, definitely.